The day my father-in-law handed me a check for $17 million, dollars, I was sitting in a hospital gown that kept sliding off my shoulder, hooked up to a morphine drip, and still wearing the bracelet they put on you when you're admitted for emergency surgery. My incision hurt every time I breathed too deeply, and he sat across from me in that plastic chair with his legs crossed like we were negotiating a real estate deal. "This is generous, Mara," he started. "My name is not Mara," I said, "and whatever you're about to say, don't." He said it anyway. "My name is Audrey. I'm 31 years old. I'm a licensed forensic CPA, which means companies hire me to find money that other people have tried to make disappear. I'm good at it. I've been good at it since I was 24 and figured out that a mid-sized logistics firm in Ohio had been hiding a secondary payroll for 11 years. I found it in 6 days. My boss at the time bought me a bottle of wine and told me I had a gift for finding things people buried. I did not know when I married my husband 4 years ago that I would one day use that gift on his own family. I need to back up. His name is Roland. We met at a charity auction in Charlotte. I was there with a client. He was there because his father's company was one of the event sponsors. Roland was charming in the way that men are charming when they've never had to try very hard. Good-looking, easy laugh, knew how to make you feel like the only person in a crowded room. He was the kind of man my mother called a lot of weather. She meant it as a warning. I heard it as a compliment. We dated for 14 months. We got engaged on a Tuesday in December in my own kitchen because Roland said he didn't want to do it somewhere with an audience. I thought that was thoughtful. Later, I understood it differently. He didn't want witnesses. His family is old money, not the kind of old money that shows up in magazines, but the kind that shows up in county records and foundation names on hospital wings. His father. I'll call him my father-in-law because that's what he was. Built his fortune in commercial real estate and logistics. He had opinions about everything: wine, weather, women who work too hard. He was perfectly civil to me at family dinners, but he said things. Small things. The kind you almost let slide because they're coded in politeness. "Audrey, you must be exhausted, working all those hours. Don't you think you'd enjoy something a little less stressful, sweetheart? Roland tells me you're very ambitious. That's admirable. In moderation." I smiled. I ate his wife's pot roast. I went home and worked late into the night on cases that kept corporations honest and helped courts understand where the money actually went. I did not need his approval. I told myself that every single time I sat at his table. Roland and I were happy, or I thought we were. Looking back now, I can see the places where things didn't quite line up. The weekends he said he was with colleagues. The phone he started leaving face down. The way he'd come home just slightly too relaxed for a man who'd supposedly been in back-to-back meetings. But I wasn't looking for those things. I was working. I was building something. I was, as it turned out, the only one of us who was. I got pregnant in February of last year. We hadn't been trying, but we weren't not trying either. And when I saw the test, I stood in the bathroom for a long time before I went to tell Roland. He hugged me. He seemed happy. I have played that moment back many times since, looking for the lie in it, and I still can't find it. Maybe he was happy, in the way that people can be happy about something and still choose to blow it up. The pregnancy was hard. I had hyperemesis early on. I lost 12 pounds in the first trimester and spent more time at the doctor's office than at my desk. Roland was attentive at first. He brought me ginger tea and held my hand during appointments. But by the 5th month, something had shifted. He was traveling more. He said it was work. I believed him because I was exhausted and because I did not have the bandwidth to also manage suspicion. At 34 weeks, my blood pressure spiked badly enough that my OB admitted me. I was in the hospital for 2 days before they decided to deliver. My daughter was born at 35 weeks, 4 pounds 9 ounces, screaming like she had something to say. She went straight to the NICU. I barely got to hold her before they took her. Roland was not in the room when she was born. He said he'd been in the parking garage and lost signal. He said he'd been there, just couldn't get up in time. He said a lot of things. He was there eventually, standing at the NICU window looking at her in her little incubator, and I watched his face, and whatever he felt in that moment, it wasn't enough. I could see that even then. She was in the NICU for 9 days. I was discharged after 4. But I stayed, I slept on a fold-out chair, I pumped every 2 hours. I learned how to do kangaroo care with tubes still taped to her chest. Roland visited. He brought me food twice. He answered his phone in the hallway a lot. On the 8th day, I had emergency surgery. My incision from the C-section had developed a complication, an infection that moved fast and scared my doctors. I was back under general anesthesia 22 hours after I'd finally been cleared to take a full shower without assistance. When I woke up, I was in pain that made the first recovery feel like a warm-up. Roland was not at the hospital that night. He said he hadn't known it was serious until it was over. My nurse later told me she had personally called him twice. I found this out 2 days later, on the day my father-in-law came to visit. He came alone. He came with a leather folder and a check that he set on the rolling tray table next to my water cup, right between my phone and a small stuffed elephant my coworker had sent for the baby. He was wearing a blazer. He had the particular calm of a man who had decided something and was simply here to deliver the news. He told me that Roland had been seeing someone else for the better part of a year. He told me he was aware this was difficult to hear. He told me the woman was expecting. He said this part quickly, like a weatherman noting a cold front, unpleasant but not his fault. He told me that the family had discussed it, and they felt that the cleanest path forward was for me to sign a separation agreement, accept the settlement, $17 million, and allow Roland to have primary custody of our daughter. He called it primary custody. He said the word "our" once, referring to the family. He never said the baby's name. He didn't know it yet. We hadn't told anyone yet. I hadn't even told Roland the name I'd chosen. I'd been waiting for a moment that felt right. I looked at the check. I looked at his face. I looked at the stuffed elephant. I said, "How long have you been planning this?" He said, "We want what's best for everyone." I said, "Get out of my room." He stood up. He straightened his jacket. He said he'd give me some time to think it over and that the offer wouldn't be on the table indefinitely. He said he hoped I would be reasonable. He said all of this like he was doing me a kindness. After he left, I sat with the check in my hand for a long time. $17 million to walk away from my daughter. I want to be clear about something, because I think it matters. I was not tempted. Not for a single second. I held that check, and I felt absolutely nothing toward it except a kind of cold clarity. Because the thing about spending years tracing hidden money is that you develop a very particular instinct about it. You learn that the number on the surface is never the whole story. You learn that when someone offers you a large round number very quickly, it's because the actual value of what they're protecting is much, much larger. $17 million is a specific number. It's also, I knew immediately, not a number someone like my father-in-law chooses by accident. I folded the check and put it in the drawer of the bedside table, and then I called my sister. Her name is Bridget. She is 4 years older than me, and she is the person I call when the world goes sideways. She answered on the second ring, and I told her everything in one long exhale, and when I was done, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Okay, what do you need?" "I need you to come stay with the baby while I work," I said. "Are you in the hospital?" "I have a laptop." She arrived the next morning with a suitcase, a tray of homemade food, and absolutely zero judgment. She held my daughter. Her name is Nell, short for Eleanor, but actually just Nell, because she looked like a Nell from the first second. And she looked at me over Nell's tiny head and she said, "Tell me what you're going to do." What I did was work. Not immediately. First I healed. First I spent 2 more days in the hospital, and then 2 weeks barely moving, and then another 2 weeks moving carefully, in increments, while Bridget slept on my couch and brought me toast and watched Nell so I could rest. I did not contact Roland. He texted twice, both times short, both times about logistics, neither time about Nell by name. My father-in-law did not reach out again. The check sat in my bedside drawer. But in the 3rd week, I opened my laptop. I started with what I knew. My husband's family's primary holding company was a matter of public record, filed in Delaware, operating in 6 states, with the kind of corporate structure that looks complicated, until you understand that complicated-looking structures usually exist for a reason. I started mapping subsidiaries. I started looking at asset transfers over the past 4 years. I started looking at the timing. Here's what I found. Over the course of about 6 weeks, my father-in-law had been moving assets for approximately 18 months. Shell companies in 2 states, a real estate transfer to a cousin that happened to coincide with Roland and me getting engaged, a series of what looked like consulting fees paid to an LLC that, when I traced it, resolved to an address that was also the registered address of a company in my mother-in-law's maiden name. It was not subtle. It was the kind of thing that looks invisible until someone actually looks. I also found something else. Roland had a life insurance policy he had never mentioned to me. I found it in a filing related to the estate trust documentation, not the policy itself, but a reference to it tucked into a footnote. The beneficiary, per the filing date, had been changed 8 months ago. He had changed it while I was pregnant. I sat with that for a long time. I also hired an attorney. Her name is Gwen, and she's the kind of family law attorney that opposing counsel describe as relentless, in a tone that makes clear they don't mean it as a compliment. A colleague of mine had used her in a divorce that involved a business partner trying to hide equity through a complex series of buy-sell agreements. Gwen found it all and then found more. I called her on a Wednesday morning, and she took the meeting the same day. I brought everything I had. She looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then she said, "You understand what this means?" "Yes," I said. "This isn't just a divorce case anymore." "I know." She looked at me. "Are you ready for what comes next?" "I've been ready," I said, "since the day he didn't come to the hospital." What came next took 4 months. I will not walk through every detail because some of it is still in the record, and some of it is not my story alone to tell. But here is the shape of it. Gwen filed for divorce. She filed on grounds that included financial fraud within the marital estate, which is something most people don't know you can do, but which opens certain discovery doors that a standard divorce filing doesn't. My father-in-law's attorneys pushed back hard and immediately. They clearly had not expected this. They had expected a woman in a hospital gown, still recovering, with a newborn in the NICU, to take the money and go away. They had not expected her to already have 6 weeks of documented asset mapping. During discovery, we deposed my father-in-law. I was not in the room. My attorney advised against it, said it would distract from the strategy, and she was right. But she told me afterward that he had walked in prepared for a simple marital dissolution and left looking like a man who had suddenly realized the room was much smaller than he'd thought. We also deposed Roland. I had not spoken to him since the day I left the hospital. He had not asked to see Nell. He had paid nothing toward her care because we were still technically married and the temporary orders had not yet come through, and I think he assumed that the family's plan was still on track, that I would eventually sign what they put in front of me, and this would all resolve the way they'd intended. In the deposition, Roland's attorney asked him a series of questions about the life insurance policy, about the beneficiary change, about the timeline. The beneficiary, it turned out, was not the other woman. It was his brother. I don't know what the inside of that family looked like at that moment. I imagine it was complicated. I know that Roland's attorney requested a recess. I know that certain documents were suddenly, at that point, forthcoming that had not been forthcoming before. Here's what the final settlement looked like after mediation. I kept the house. Roland had purchased it in both our names, and despite the attempts to move assets, the property had remained in the marital estate. I did not particularly want the house. It had too many rooms and a kitchen I'd never had time to love. But I wanted the equity, and the equity was significant. I received a settlement that was substantially more than the $17 million my father-in-law had offered in that hospital room. I will not say the exact number because it is not the point, and because it is my daughter's inheritance, not a headline. But it was enough. It was more than enough. Roland has supervised visitation with Nell. This was his choice, through his attorney. He did not request more. I don't fully understand that, and I have stopped trying to. Nell is 6 months old now, and she does not understand it either. but she will. And when she does, I will tell her that it is not her fault and that her father is a person with his own story and that her story is just beginning. My father-in-law's company is currently under review by the state AG's office. This is not something I initiated. I provided documentation to my attorney, and she made certain decisions about what to pass along and to whom. Those decisions were hers. But I would be dishonest if I said I was surprised by the outcome. The woman Roland had been seeing did not stay with him. She left, approximately 2 months after the deposition, and I heard this through mutual acquaintances in the way you hear these things. Sideways, with more detail than you needed. I don't feel anything particular about it. I feel something about her baby, who will grow up in a different kind of mess than I feared, but whose situation is not mine to manage. The check, all this time, sat in my bedside drawer. I never deposited it. It was made out to me, and it was real, but it was also evidence, and also I did not want their $17 million. I wanted my daughter. I already had her. Bridget stayed with me for 3 months. When she finally went home, she cried at the airport, and I cried in my car in the parking structure for a little longer than I'd planned. Then I drove home, and I picked Nell up from her bouncy chair, and I held her until she fell asleep on my shoulder. I think about what my father-in-law thought would happen. I think he walked into my hospital room and saw a woman who was physically recovering, emotionally broken, financially dependent on a marriage that had already collapsed. And he thought, this is the moment. He thought I was at the bottom, and he thought that at the bottom, people take what they're given. He did not know that I had spent my entire career at the bottom of other people's financial records, finding what they thought they'd buried. He did not know that the bottom is where everything true about a situation lives. He did not know that the morning after he left my room, I stopped crying and opened my laptop. My mother used to say that the most dangerous thing you can underestimate is a quiet woman with something to protect. Nell is sleeping in the next room right now. I can hear her on the monitor. That little rhythm of breathing that I memorized in the NICU. The one I woke up checking for every hour for the first weeks we were home. She is healthy. She is stubborn, and she is loud, and she is my grandmother's nose, and she is mine. And she is exactly enough. The stuffed elephant sits on the shelf above her crib. I kept it because she likes it, and because some things that come from hard moments turn out to be good things, and because she doesn't need to know the full story yet. She'll know it when she's ready, and when she is, I'll tell her that her mother never signed a single thing she didn't mean. I keep thinking about the moment my father-in-law set that check on my tray table. The way he straightened his jacket before he sat down. The way he spoke slowly, like he was being patient with someone who needed extra time to understand. He had looked at me, in a hospital gown, 2 days out of a second surgery, my daughter still in a NICU down the hall. And he had made a calculation. He had decided what I was worth and what I was capable of, and he had been wrong on both counts. That's the thing about being underestimated. It feels like an insult right up until the moment it becomes the most useful thing anyone has ever given you. I didn't win because I was lucky. I didn't win because the universe decided to balance some invisible ledger on my behalf. I won because I had spent years building something that couldn't be taken from me. A set of skills, a discipline, a way of seeing through the surface of things to what was actually there. When my father-in-law walked into that room, he thought he was dealing with a woman at her lowest. He was actually dealing with someone who had been trained for her entire career to find the truth inside situations that other people had deliberately made confusing. That's what I want to say to anyone who's sitting in their own version of that hospital room right now. The situation where someone with more power than you has made a decision about your future and presented it to you as a done deal. The moment where everything feels like it's already been decided. It hasn't, not even close. What I've learned, and I mean learned the hard way, in the specific way that you only learn things that cost you something, is that integrity isn't a personality trait you're born with. It's a decision you make over and over again in small moments, long before the big ones arrive. Every time I chose to do my work honestly, every time I documented something carefully when it would have been easier not to, every time I told a client the truth they didn't want to hear, those weren't just professional choices. They were practice. They were me building the kind of person who could sit in that room and not flinch. And the clarity I needed. That took years too. Not intelligence in the way people mean when they say someone is smart. I mean the slower, quieter thing. Learning to look at a complicated situation without letting fear or anger or wishful thinking tell you what you're seeing. Learning to ask what is actually true here, not what I want to be true, not what would hurt less to believe. That kind of thinking doesn't come from a degree. It comes from doing it badly first, and then better again. Bridget asked me once, during those months when she was sleeping on my couch and watching Nell so I could work, whether I was angry. I thought about it for a long time before I answered. I told her I didn't have room to be angry. Anger takes up space, and I needed all my space for something else. What I felt instead was a kind of steadiness. The same steadiness that got me through the NICU nights and the second surgery and the deposition and all the months in between. Not toughness exactly. I cried plenty. But something underneath the crying that didn't move. Something that kept saying, you know what to do. Go do it. Nell is going to grow up knowing that her mother faced something genuinely terrible and did not collapse. Not because I'm exceptional, but because I refused to treat the hardest moment of my life as the final one. That refusal, quiet, unglamorous, shown up for every single day, is the only thing I want to teach her. The check is gone now, evidence submitted, case closed. But I still remember exactly how it felt in my hand. Light. Like it weighed almost nothing. Like $17 million couldn't actually hold the weight of what they thought they were buying. They were wrong about what I was worth. I already knew. I just had to show them.